Good evening from Vietnam. Good morning to you, Tom. Thanks a lot for spending your beautiful morning to join our Insight Sharing Show and share your stories and your insights to our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you for your generosity. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Tom, um, in our culture, in Asian culture, it's very honor if we can have you to share a little bit about yourself, the works you do for our audience. Would you please start by sharing a little bit of yourself first?
Yes, thank you. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, in a small 800 square foot rented house on a dirt street that was eventually paved. I grew up in a fairly poor family. Nobody had ever been to college on either side of my family. And when I was in high school, my mother said, "There's no money for college, so figure out what kind of job you want to do for your life." But then I was offered a scholarship to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, paying for absolutely everything: tuition, room, food, books, spending money. It was an amazing opportunity, called a Moorhead Scholarship, now called a Moorhead Cane, modeled on the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford University. And so I went to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, fell in love with philosophy and religious studies, went to Yale University on a fellowship there, all expenses paid for me to do two PhDs at Yale. So I was very blessed as a young man to be given that educational opportunity. I got PhDs in philosophy and religious studies, went to the University of Notre Dame to teach philosophy. And after 15 years of a wonderful career, I felt a need to bring philosophy to where people are in their lives. Not everybody can go to a great university. I almost was not able to go to a great university. I thought, why don't I, as a philosopher, bring philosophy to wherever people are? So I resigned my position as a full professor at a great university and set out as an independent philosopher, which is just unknown in our country and in most other countries as well. I've done that now for 30 years, independent philosophy. I've written over 30 books. I've given over 1,200 public presentations to rooms of sometimes up to 10,000 people in a room listening to philosophy. I've had a very unusual experience as a philosopher. And so I'm happy to bring that experience and the wisdom I've gathered as a public philosopher to be in service to you and to your audience as we think about things that matter.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Tom. I have the first question is, by the time that you got the full scholarship to the university at Chapel Hill, right? So you
Yeah.
can decide any major, but why philosophy?
Well, my parents wanted me to major in business, and then they wanted me to go to law school so that I could have a career in the corporate world and maybe rise someday to an executive level, so I would have job security. But my father taught me life is supposed to be a series of adventures. The ones you've been on already are preparing you for the next adventure, sometimes in ways you can't even imagine. And I came to believe, looking at his career of doing very different things, one thing after another, just following his sense of what he loved, where he thought he could make a difference. And so when people said, you've got to choose a safe path, you've got to choose job security, I thought maybe the only real security in life is living your proper adventure. And so I tried to look within and to see what it was that intrigued me to study that I might be able to use to make a difference for other people. And it became philosophy and religious studies. And my mother never could understand how I would ever be paid to do that. Who would pay you to know these things? She would say. I said, I don't know, but I think I'm supposed to do it. I feel a sense of calling to do it. And as a matter of fact, it's been a wonderful career. Here I am at the age of 72. I'm still in the most creative period of my life. I just finished writing 2 new books. I have another one in my computer. I have new ideas every day. So I'm just going to continue to live my adventures.
Live proper adventure, right? In 10
That's
years in the
right.
university as a professor, and then you took another proper adventure to become independent philosopher, something that's completely new in America and as many
Yeah.
other countries around the world. You tell us, what is an independent philosopher doing?
Well, when I was first asked to give a talk to a business group, um,
Mm.
a group of young business people came to me and said, "Could you give us a talk about ethics and about the ethics of decision making, how to make good decisions?" And I said, "Okay, that's not my specialty, but sure, I'll come up with something." I gave a talk to about 50 or 60 people, and everybody there started asking me to come to their real estate company, their bank, their church, their civic organization, Rotary, Kiwanis, all these community clubs, and give the same talk. And nobody was offering to pay me for that. I didn't even think I should be paid. I just wanted to build bridges between the university and the community. And so for 2 years, I was giving free talks to anybody who would ask. And then somebody said, "Oh, we've got a budget for a speaker." I said, "Oh, I didn't know speakers got paid for this." And pretty soon, everybody that was calling me had a budget for a speaker. Again, a big surprise. And it wasn't much at first, but within a year or two, people were offering me to pay me for an hour what my university paid me for a year of teaching. And I thought, well, this is unimaginable. One company, Merrill Lynch, in 1995, had me speak to their global leadership team. One of their top executives had graduated from Notre Dame, where I taught, and he knew about what I was doing. And so he had me invited to speak to this group of 750 global leaders. And that one talk of 45 minutes led to over 50 invitations in a 3-year period. And they would tell their friends at other financial service companies and other banks, who would then tell their friends. And pretty soon I was speaking to Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Toyota, Mercedes-Benz. I was speaking to Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Raymond James Financial Services. I was speaking to the United States Air Force, to 1,500 of their top officers. Every kind of organization was hearing about what I was doing. And that, as you can imagine, kept me busy. One year in 1998, I was in 93 cities giving philosophical talks on success, on corporate culture, on human happiness, on how to deal with change in our lives. Whatever people would ask me to speak on, I would look back through the history of philosophy to find the greatest wisdom that we have on that topic. And I would put it together into an energetic and entertaining hour so that people would laugh a lot. They would hear great stories, but they would go away with ideas they could use right away. So that's how I, as a public philosopher, have been serving people. And now people are asking me to serve them on an individual level as a coach, almost like an executive coach, but a philosophical version of that, like a guide. And that's a new development in my service as a public philosopher.
Beautiful. I want to bring you back to the first public speaking that you gave. And it was
Yeah.
free. And for 2 years, you've been working, giving out, free talks. And then one day, it build you a career with, like go to the public and share your knowledge and insight and stuff like that. But that first
Right.
talk is very important on the topic of ethics, right? Where it's
Right.
not something that you are familiar with, and you said that you're going to come up with something.
Yeah.
All right. So normally, normal people will say, okay, if it's not an area that I'm good at or I'm an expert in, I'm gonna just walk away and give that opportunity to somebody else. But Tom Morris decided to say yes, and then figure it out later. So what happened in your mind back then when you respond to them that way?
Well, I thought to myself, okay, these are young business people who have been picked out as the future leaders of their businesses in the community. They want to have a session on ethics, on how to do the right thing, how to make the tough decisions in an ethical, honest, honorable way. That's not what my specialty was. I could have told them to call 3 other people at Notre Dame who did have that as a specialty. But I thought, here, why should I pass up this opportunity to try to do something good? Because maybe if I look into this, I'll learn something, and then I can pass that on to them. So it will not only be good for them, it'll be good for me to stretch myself a little bit. And I'll tell you something, this has become a career pattern for me. When people say, hey, have you ever spoken on disruptive change, how to deal with hard change? And I would say, no, never have. Would you be willing to put together something? Sure, okay, I'll look into it. I've always been open. a car dealer. It was an Oldsmobile dealer for General Motors. He called me and said, we have motivational speakers at our big meeting every year. They talk about success. They say, set goals, aim high, believe in yourself. He said, there's got to be more to it than that. Did the great philosophers ever talk about success? I said, I don't know. That's not the kind of thing I studied. Do you want me to look into it? He said, yeah, look into it. So I looked into success and I gave a talk for the Oldsmobile dealers. They got so excited. I said, oh, maybe I should give this talk to other groups. And I did for other groups, and they all got excited. So I wrote a book about it called True Success, A New Philosophy of Excellence. It was my first non-academic book. I had written 10 or 11 books for other professional philosophers on deep, technical, philosophical topics. But I thought these people are getting so excited about ethical success. So I blended ethics and success because the ancient philosophers did. They thought the only kind of success that is sustainable has to be rooted in good behavior, in ethical, honest, reliable, dependable behavior. So I wrote a book, True Success, and it became very popular. And then I realized, okay, there's another side of success other than just goal setting. The other side of success is relationship building. Nobody ever succeeds by themselves. We always succeed because of partnerships and assistance from other people. So I looked into that and wrote a book about that called If Aristotle Ran General Motors. And again, this was all new to me. This was not what I studied in college or in graduate school. It was a side of philosophy that people had forgotten about, the practical side of philosophy. Everybody was doing the technical side, logic, metaphysics, epistemology, aesthetics, asking very theoretical questions. But there's a whole side of philosophy that's very practical that we had forgotten about for 100 years. So I was able to be the pioneer to rediscover the practical side of philosophy, the wisdom side, the idea of philosophy, not just as a way of thinking, but as a way of life. And so that has enriched my own life immensely ever since.
Beautiful. And then what did your mom talk to you when she figured out that you could have a beautiful life as an independent public philosopher and can really make more money than a professor in teaching?
Yeah, she was very surprised by it. I mean, she was very proud that I was at a famous university like Yale for graduate school and Carolina for undergraduate. She was very proud that I taught at a famous place like Notre Dame. But then when every business she had ever heard of, IBM, paid me to come and speak to thousands of people. Every other company that, the grocery store where she would go shopping, the food she would buy, those companies had hired me as a philosopher. She was amazed that in answer to her question, who is ever going to pay you for this? She was amazed the answer was almost everybody.
but for the 2 years of relentlessly working and giving speeches for without any like money coming back to the family,
Yeah.
it must be a lot of challenges financially also for you. And now there's a lot of people that working on their dreams and facing such similar challenges like that, financially issues, to maintain a normal operation at home. So Tom, back then, what did you talk to yourself every day?
Yeah. I said, I'm learning, I'm growing. And I did have my teaching job. I didn't leave Notre Dame until my income from speaking was double my teaching income. And so I thought, okay, now I can make a transition. Also, when I left, I didn't just jump off the cliff. I didn't just jump off the side of a mountain. I said, could I have a leave of absence for 1 year so that if this works, I'll stay in North Carolina, but if it doesn't work, I'll come back to Notre Dame. And they said, okay, you can have a leave of absence for 1 year. And in fact, they paid half my teaching salary. They gave me for that leave of absence. And I was also making income from the speaking. So that gave me a period of trial. So I tell people, don't be crazy. Don't leave what you know in a way that's foolish. Be wise about transitions. You use the word proper adventure. A proper adventure is a wise adventure. Don't leap into the dark where you don't know where you're going, but make sure you prepare a path as you go. So I was giving these talks for free at the same time I was teaching. So we did have the small teaching income, never paid, philosophy professors are never paid much, but that was enough for my family to get by on while I was learning this new area of how I could be of service to people. And I've come to believe there are four stages of life, and there are four main human activities. Each one of these activities defines one of the stages, but all four activities go on in each stage. For example, let's say our first 25 years. Let's divide 100. Let's imagine living 100 years and divide it into four 25-year periods. The first 25 years, the main activity is learning. You're learning about the world. You're learning about yourself. You're learning about other people. You're studying in school. That activity is very important for the first 25 years. It's probably the dominant activity. The next 25 years, the dominant activity is building. You're building a family, you're building a career, maybe you're building a business, you're building your structures, friendships, relationships that will serve the world the rest of your life. So you've done your main focus of learning. You're still learning while you're building, yes, but building has become your main activity, and learning is a secondary activity serving the building. Then from age 50 to 75, I think serving should be the main activity. So you're also learning, you're also probably building, but mainly you're trying to be of service to others. That's your main focus. And then in the fourth stage, from the age 75 to the age 100, you're guiding. You're sharing wisdom with others that you've accumulated throughout your life. Now, hopefully you're also learning, you're also still building, you're also still serving, but you're serving by way of guiding mainly. That is the premier of the activities. Now, I think young people learn best when they also try to build, serve, and guide those of their peers and younger children. And so I think each of the stages of life is enriched by all four activities, but there's one that rises to the top in each of these four stages: learning, building, serving, and guiding. And that's how I've come to see my life. I'm 72 years old now, so I am still in the serving stage. Now, I'm always learning. I'm building in the sense of creating new books, creating new ways of being of service to people, whether through executive coaching or through using virtual tools like we are today. I'm always building new things, but I'm mainly doing so to be of service. Now, I try to guide people now. I've always tried to be a guide to people who are not as far along the path as I am, but I can imagine that in a few years and for the rest of my life, guidance may be the main thing I do. I won't be building as much. Hopefully I'm still learning. I will be doing some building and still will be doing some serving in other ways, but guidance will be the premier thing. So that map of four stages is represented in different ways by different religious traditions, by different wisdom traditions in different parts of the world. And if I can help people to understand that, they will understand that they don't always have to be doing the same thing in the same way. But at different stages of our lives, we have different emphases, and those will change. And when we adapt to that change, we can feel fulfillment and happiness in our role in the world and in our communities.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you say that you hope that you will continue to learning, to building, to serving, but the premier get into the next stage in guidance, guiding, right? But I'm
Yeah.
sure you will always be a learner, a service of
Yeah.
others, a
Yeah.
builder, Tom. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and you spoke a lot about the wisdom, about the stages of life, and it fit really well into the purpose of our conversation today. Is about aging, it's about wisdom, because my wife and I, we saw a lot of people around us, and really having issue, with growing up, with aging, and maintaining their ability to absorbing wisdom and sharing wisdom in their lives, right? So, to you, I want to pick your answer on the question. To you, what is wisdom over time, though?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Wisdom often comes with age, but age does not guarantee wisdom. We see old people around us all the time acting as foolishly as they did when they were children, uh, acting with anger and petulance and selfishness. And so age is no guarantee of wisdom, but it provides the possibility of wisdom because it provides rich experience that wisdom can be drawn from. It provides the seeds of wisdom if we are fertile soil for growing those seeds. So that I see wisdom is about two things about wisdom. We often think of wisdom in a propositional way. It's propositions, it's sentences, it's aphorisms, epigrams, clever sayings about life. Sometimes these little sayings, they capture an aspect of wisdom, but they are never wisdom itself. Wisdom is embodied insight. It's lived insight. It's not just what we think. It's not just what we say. It's how we are, how we act, how we live in the world. So it's always embodied insight. We live it out. Well, you can't ever imagine the truth of the statement, oh, he's a wise man, but he lives like a fool. No, if he lives like a fool, he's not a wise man. He may know many wise sayings, but unless he lives those things, he's not wise himself. So I've come to see wisdom as embodied insight for living, and I've also come to see wisdom as involving two things. It involves guidance and guardrails. Now, let me explain this. A young man from Madrid, Spain, came to visit with me a few years ago, and he asked me the question, what is wisdom? And the first answer I gave him was, it's embodied insight for living. And then all of a sudden I had an idea I'd never had before. I said, wisdom is guidance and guardrails. And he said, what are guardrails? Because he's a Spanish speaker. He's not a native English speaker. I said, well, if you're driving up in the mountains and you're on a small road and it's very curvy, there will be a metal railing on the side of the road to keep your car from falling off. He said, oh, guardrails. Okay. I said, wisdom is guidance to lead us forward to where we need to go, but it's also guardrails to keep us from falling off the edge on our way, from having a terrible accident, from getting off the path. It leads us forward like a beacon, like a signal, like a light on a hill. It leads us forward, but it also gives us protection. And in the last 50 years, most of the wisdom literature in our culture here in America has been about guidance, but very little has been about guardrails. People have been saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they haven't been saying enough. Be sure not to do that. Be sure not to do that. Stay away from that. Don't fall into this problem. And the wisest people have given us both the guidance, the positives, and the guardrails, the cautionary words as well. That is the whole of wisdom, I think.
So why over the past 50 years, not a lot of people talks about the guardrails in terms of wisdom?
Yeah, people are so enthusiastic about success, which they too often define as just making a lot of money, having a lot of power, enjoying a lot of status, maybe getting famous. They just want to know, what should I do? What should I do? Okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. But nobody is issuing warnings. Be careful not to do that. Be careful to stay away from this. And so we see a lot of people whose very success turns into disaster, catastrophe. They become famous, they become rich, and then they become drug addicted, or they spend all their money and all of a sudden they're broken in debt for millions of dollars. They have a problem they didn't have before their great success. So we need the cautionary wisdom as well as the positive guidance. We need those guardrails. We need those warnings that the wise people have always understood where the trouble is in life, where the dangers are. We need to listen to that as well. And sometimes, this is interesting to me, sometimes we get those warnings in great literature, in epic poems, in novels, in plays, in short stories. I've found, for example, Mary Shelley, who was a young novelist in England in the 1800s. When she was a teenager, she was probably 16 to 18 years old. She wrote a book called Frankenstein, a very famous novel about a very smart man named Victor Frankenstein, who set it as his goal. He wanted to learn enough science so he could create a thinking, feeling being out of just basic parts. He could create something like a human being, and he would be praised forever. He would be famous forever. And in fact, the being would look at him as a god. And so he set his goal, and he did everything the guidance wisdom tells you to do. Do this, set a goal, be confident, focus your concentration on what it takes, be consistent in your pursuit of the goal. He did all those things, and he created a monster he let loose into the world, a monster he couldn't control, and who killed the people that meant the most to him. Now, that's a cautionary tale, a great metaphor for success in many people's lives who follow the guidance but don't pay attention to the guardrails. Victor Frankenstein's problem was his motivation was selfish. His motivation was self-aggrandizing grandiosity. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to be great. He wanted to be worshipped. He had no thought about the good of others, the common good. And so because he attained his goal, he unleashed into the world a monster he couldn't control. Well, boy, that's a great metaphor for a lot of people's success in the world today. It's not answerable to the guardrails that the wise people have given us. So I tell people, read great fiction, read books like Frankenstein, read an epic poem like Beowulf, which was an Anglo-Saxon epic about a great warrior who, as he grew older, didn't change the way he did things. And he just wanted to, just like Frankenstein, he wanted to be famous. He wanted to do things by himself so he would get all the praise. But he set himself up for his own demise, his own death because of that. We have great cautionary literature throughout history. I advise people to read it. In fact, one of my new books is going to be exactly on that.
Oh, really? What's the book's name?
It's called The Frankenstein Factor, and it's subtitled Monster Success and Massive Failure.
Monster Success and Massive Failure. I'll look for it. So, besides the guardrails is lacking in our life, what else do you think is a major impact on us to be able to be aging with wisdom, though?
Yeah, we need to recover and rediscover the importance of talking to older people and listening. Young people nowadays think they need to listen to each other, and that's important, but it's just as important to listen to people who are older and who are younger. When people in their 20s and 30s are not around children and they're not around older people, they only have a very small view of what life is about. Being with children can keep wonder and curiosity and awe alive in their lives, because children are amazed by everything. They're curious about everything. And a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they lose that curiosity. But if they could be around more children, they would be reminded of the importance of curiosity in life. And then they're not around older people, or when they are, they just don't listen. They don't pay attention. Oh, you lived in another time. It's modern times now. I don't need to listen to that. But if they could listen to the wisdom of their elders, they would get their bearings much better, and they would be given great guidance and great guardrails, because the older people who have become wiser have seen the things that they have not yet experienced and can give them great advice about what may be ahead on the road. Plato actually said, we need to consult the wisdom of people who have been down this road of life before us, who have seen the opportunities and the obstacles that may lie ahead. And they have learned sometimes the hard way about how to deal with these things properly. We can avoid all the pain and suffering, or much of it, that they had to go through if we will just listen and learn.
Wow. So how could we help to build that intergenerations, like reservoirs for the children to talk to the parents, to talk to the elderly
Yeah, yeah.
for exchanging the wisdom?
I saw some of my students at Notre Dame experience this. First of all, they were around older professors, and they listened to their professors, and their professors at Notre Dame, it was a religious institution as well as an educational institution founded by the Catholic, an element of the Catholic Church. And so many of the professors wanted to pass on wisdom as well as whatever they were teaching, whether it was mathematics or sciences or whatever. They would weave wisdom into their lectures as well. So the young people were exposed to the wisdom of their elders, and also a high percentage of the student body at Notre Dame did volunteer work in the community. And often it had to do with children, big brothers and big sisters, or the Boys and Girls Club, or they would be around younger people, people who were 5 years younger, 10 years younger, sometimes 15 years younger. And so they would be getting the sense of playfulness and childhood wonder and childhood curiosity. They would be hearing from their elders. So sometimes that happens for young people in a university environment where they go beyond the lessons of the class and go see their professors and ask them personal questions about their own lives. And when they do volunteer work and expose themselves to younger people, because even at the age of 18, they could forget what it was like to be 5 or 6 years old. They need to be reminded of that. So I encourage people to get involved in multi-generational activities. It will enrich your life tremendously, so that when your peers turn to you, you will have more to say than just what you've learned by yourself at your age. You will be communicating the broad spectrum of human experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have another person asking me here this question for you. So, what advice would you give to young individuals to seeking to cultivate wisdom throughout their lives? What should they do? Yes.
Yeah. I would say interview some older people. Do it as a project for school if they'd like. Say, I'd like to interview some older people. Start with family members, maybe some neighbors, maybe some people you know in another connection, maybe a teacher or two. But ask them, what's the greatest wisdom you've learned in your life? And they may be surprised at what they hear. But if they develop a habit of asking good questions, then they will learn some great wisdom. Now, even with AI, the development of artificial intelligence, we have begun to learn just in the past year the importance of what AI researchers call prompt engineering or prompt design. If you want to get good answers from ChatGPT or Bard or any of the other large language model generative AI services, you have to learn to ask good questions. If you ask poor questions, you ask bad questions, you'll get bad answers. But if you learn how to ask questions in a better way, you will get much better answers. Well, in Western philosophy, Socrates started our enterprise, our version of philosophy, by learning to ask great questions. So if young people approach adults and ask questions, and they can learn to ask better and better questions, but questioning is a skilled behavior. It's like baseball or basketball or tennis or golf or any other skilled behavior. You're not going to be great at it when you first start, but you have to start to get better at it. It's a skilled behavior. And so I encourage young people, when they're around an older person, ask questions. I'm around younger people all the time who never ask any questions about my life, about what I've learned, about my experiences. I think, wow, I wish I had asked older people more questions when I was young. I wish I had asked my parents more questions about what they had learned in life. If we can convey that to people in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s right now, if they can begin to do that, just like with Chat GPT, they can get better at asking questions, and they will get better and deeper and more useful answers.
Beautiful. Tom, I note down in here in this note that you say that some people who are aging, who speak a lot of wisdom, but they're not, they don't have it. You know, they
Yeah,
just know the wisdom words and say about it, but they don't have it. And there's a
yeah,
lot of people like that in this world nowadays. They make a lot of noises. They make people confused about whether or not what they do, what they say is right, is real or so.
yeah,
And for young generation, because like you say earlier, they don't they yet get into that stage of like knowledge of knowing, so it's hard for them to validate.
yeah.
So in what way we can help these people to validate the information they receive, which one is wisdom and which one is not wisdom, for them to not bring too much garbage into their lives though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a writer, a British professor of literature back in the 1960s. He was very popular, named C.S. Lewis, Clive Staples Lewis. He was Professor C.S. Lewis. He wrote some very popular books. He
Yes.
said, every age, every period of history has its hidden assumptions. Assumptions in our thinking we're not even aware that we have. A way of viewing the world that we don't realize is maybe not the best. We just grew into it, and it's like we're not even aware of it. There's an old parable of two young fish swimming in the sea, and an old fish comes up and says, "How's the water today, boys?" And young fish looks at the other and says, "What's water?" You see, they've been in it their whole lives, and so they're not even aware that it's an element that they're in. C.S. Lewis said every historical period has its own assumptions, many of which may be false. We need to read the books of other historical periods to give us corrective understanding against which we can judge our current prejudices. He said, the books of the future are not yet available, unfortunately, so we should all try to read the books of the past because they were written with different worldviews, with different assumptions, and across different cultures. You can correct for your own prejudices, because there are people right now who are very popular on the internet with little short, snappy wisdom sayings. But if you think about the sentence that they give you, you think about it enough, you realize, well, it's not literally true. There are all these exceptions. There are all these qualifications you have to make. But all they're looking for is something short and snappy that could be on a t-shirt, that could be on a car bumper sticker, that could be on a meme, an internet meme, and a little poster. Sometimes those short, snappy aphorisms are not accurate. And so we
Mhm.
need to question, always question. So I say to young people, try to read old books as well as new books. Try to question what you hear. Survey many sources of information. Don't just trust one. And
Mhm.
always ask other people what they think. Be intellectually humble, because humility ends up being almost like what we call a superpower. If you are humble about your own viewpoints, your own opinions, you realize that you could be wrong about various things, then you're open to learning. You're open to growing. You're open to real wisdom. And then as you grow in wisdom, you will understand the difference between what is really certain, what is really solid and sure, and the things that you still might need to question in your life. Socrates said, question, examine yourself. His student Plato said, examine your situation, because things are not often what they seem. Most people live on surface appearances, but the wise learn to question appearances to see how things really are.
Beautiful. So I have a few last questions for you, Tom. And
Yeah.
the next one is it's about embody wisdom. All
Yeah.
right. So now we have all the information. You accumulate the insights into your bodies. How can you make it a lifestyle?
Yeah, it's not easy, and it's never perfect. In fact, I wrote a little book about patriotism a few years ago, a love of your country, and it came out in this country and in other countries. It was called The Everyday Patriot: How to Be a Great American Now. But I hope that people in other countries would also read it. And a young man from Romania wrote me and he said he loved the book, and because of it, he wanted to be a better Romanian. And I said, that's exactly what I want from this book. So I took people back to the founding fathers of the United States, the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the people who wrote the Constitution, because they read philosophers from ancient times, and they learned about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They learned about equality. They learned about freedom. And I was in a book club, a virtual book club once, talking about these things. And a man said, well, how can you say the founders had these values of liberty, freedom, equality? Because some of them had slaves. Some of them had no regard for the opinions of women. Some of them had no regard for the opinions of Native Americans, the indigenous people on the continent. And I said, well, look, he said, I don't think they had these values at all. I think it was just lip service. They were just talking about these things. I said, well, wait a minute. There are two ways of having a value. There are two ways of understanding what it is to have a value, like freedom or equality. I said, one is the absolutist view. And the absolutist view says, unless you live something perfectly, with perfect consistency, you don't have it as a value at all. I said, if we took that view of what it is to have a value, hardly anybody would have hardly any values at all, because we're not perfect. So the absolutist view seems to be an extreme view. So what else is possible? I said, an aspirational view. The aspirational view of what it is to have a value says this: if a value like freedom or a value like equality is one you aspire to live in accordance with, if it guides you like that light on a hill, and even though you struggle and stumble and sometimes are inconsistent, you realize that and pick yourself up and try to get better, then it is one of your values. It's an aspirational value. You don't live it absolutely, but you live it in an aspirational, imperfect, struggling way. It is still your value. And I say the same thing about wisdom. In this world, it's hard to imagine somebody who embodies wisdom perfectly. Maybe there are such people. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome said maybe once every 500 years there's a perfectly wise person. But most of us are aspiring to live wisdom. And so we embody it, but imperfectly. Now, the big problem with a young person is they see an older person who slips and falls, and they say, oh, he's a hypocrite. He doesn't really believe that. I'm not listening to anything he says. That's a false approach. That assumes the absolutist view of wisdom. If you have in mind an aspirational view, you say, okay, he says some wise things, he does some wise things. He messes up too, like all of us, but he still shows me a path forward. I think I can learn to embody wisdom too. Even if I struggle, even if I fall short, I will correct myself. I will get better. With an aspirational view of what it is to embody wisdom, you are always growing. There's an ancient Hindu proverb that says, success is not being better than some other person. Success is being better than your previous self. So growth, wisdom is all about growth in a certain direction. If we understand that, then we will not refuse to listen to people who make mistakes. We will acknowledge that we could make the same mistakes if we're not careful, and we'll watch the good things they do and try to emulate those things.
Beautiful. So our audience would like to know your practical way of embody wisdom in your life, Tom. So, give us some example or something that you've been doing to help you to continue expanding the wisdom and continue to share it with others.
Oh, yeah. I read great literature of the past all the time. For example, during the pandemic, I reread the Iliad and the Odyssey by the ancient Greek author Homer. I reread the Odyssey in three translations. I reread it 4 times in 1 year. I reread the Iliad twice in one year, and for the first time, I came to understand both books. I had read them in previous years, once or twice, but it was only repeated reading. C.S. Lewis, that I quoted earlier, said, if a book is not worth reading twice, it was not worth reading once.
Wow.
The best books have such a depth that we can never exhaustively understand by one reading. There's a British writer named Somerset Maugham. He wrote a book called The Razor's Edge. He wrote many novels. A few years ago, I read 5 of his novels in one year. I went back to The Razor's Edge and reread it last week because it's a story about a 20-year-old young man who has a bunch of friends, and all they want to do is get rich. All they want to do is get socially prominent, and he decides he's not going to follow along with his friends and chase money and chase status. He's going to pursue wisdom instead, and they think he's crazy. They think he's odd. They think he's unusual. But they all experience great problems in their lives, and he experiences continual learning in wisdom. I went back to reread that book because I realized if a book is good, I shouldn't just read it once. I should read it twice or 3 times or 4 times. The most ancient human epic story, Gilgamesh, is about a leader set in 2,700 years BCE. It's about a bad leader who becomes a good leader. I have read that probably 12 or 15 times, cover to cover. Beowulf, I mentioned earlier, I've probably read 10 or 12 times. The best books are worth reading more than once. That is a practice in my own life that has changed everything for me. We always run to the new book, the new bestseller. I want to read it. I want to read another one. I want to read another one. Go read the good books and read them over and over and over. It's like having many conversations with a wise person. If a person is really wise, don't just talk to him once. Talk to him as many times as you can. A book is like the crystallized wisdom of a wise person. Go back to it over and over and over again. There will always be fresh water in that well. But if we go to a polluted well, the water will always be dangerous. To a good well, a clean well, a pure well, the water will always be refreshing. Go back to that well.
Beautiful. So last question, Tom, is now you in the in the 3rd stage of your life, moving forward into the 4th stage with guidance, right? So you're in the intersection between those 2 stages. If you have a chance to meet the Tom at the 1st stage, and say one thing to that version of Tom about the future, what would you tell yourself?
Never let fear restrain your choices in your life. Never be afraid of other people's reactions. If you think something is right to do, do it. Be courageous. Too many times in my life as a young person, I was afraid of what somebody else would think if I did something I thought to be right, or I was afraid of a conversation that needed to happen because I was afraid the other person would get angry at what I had to say. I wish I had had more courage as a young person. Now, a lot of people look at my career and think I'm such a courageous person. I was willing to leave a lifetime job at a great university to try something that nobody else was doing. You must be so brave. Well, in some things, but in other things, I let other people's opinions keep me from doing what I knew to be the right thing. But I wish I had been more courageous in those little things. So if I could talk to my earlier self, I would say, be careful. Fear can be an important guide in life when you're confronted with true danger. But we fear things that are not dangerous at all. In fact, sometimes we just fear other people's opinions of us when we do the right thing. Fear is a feeling. Courage is a choice. Always be willing to make that choice to do the right thing. I would tell my younger self, don't let yourself fall off the road because of fear. Always believe in the right thing and have the courage to do it because you will be rewarded for that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And like you say earlier, you read the book, it's a good book, read it over and over. If you meet a great person in life, right, have more conversation with that person over and over. I would love to have more conversation with you, Tom, regarding to fear, regarding to choices. Those are the things that we can help to spread the goodness, to help the people go to the next level of wisdom and make better choice in their lives. So
Yeah,
tonight,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
you and I have had wonderful conversations. And if any of your viewers wants to see this book, a book I just put out again after 25 years, I did a new edition, the silver anniversary of The Art of Achievement. I hold up this book because many people have told me they have read the book many, many times. One person says he's got sticky notes attached to the pages all through of things he wants to remind himself of. The Art of Achievement in this colorful version, the new silver anniversary edition. If people want to read that, I would encourage them, don't read it just once. Go back to it again, because it resulted from me doing that with the books of the past, going back over and over and over.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. I will definitely looking for the book for ourselves and then for the friends that I have. Okay, Tom?
Yeah,
And I look forward to have more conversation with you in the future. Meanwhile, I need to let you go for your next meeting. So thanks a lot for spending the beautiful time with us in the morning and sharing so many good things. I wish all the best to you and your family, and I look forward to seeing you in Carolina one day in person. It will give
thank
you a
you.
big hug.
Thank you so much. And now I know if I give you two thumbs up, then I have some fireworks
Fireworks.
behind me on my screen.
Bye bye, my friend.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank
wonderful to
you.
be with you again.
It is to me too. Thank you very much. Bye bye.